We've gone to visit my wife Sarah's family every summer since we got married about 4 years ago. They live in a small town way up in the mountains. Her parents own a lot of land, so we would spend our time riding ATVs and hiking trails. Here's a picture I took a while back, just so you have some idea of what I'm talking about. A while back I took a week off work, and we drove up there to spend the time with her parents and siblings. It was a good time, and the week passed way too quick. Sunday rolled around, and we loaded up our old sedan for the drive home. We left her parents' place in the late afternoon, and had started winding our way down the mountain towards the highway, when Sarah sighed. "Great, check it out," she said. She handed me her phone. It showed that the highway was red with traffic for something like 25 miles. "Must be an accident," she said. "I guess we'll be sitting in traffic for a while." I pulled to the side of the road and pulled out my own phone. I saw that there was a long, winding road that cut through the mountains for nearly 50 miles, finally rejoining the highway after the traffic ended. I figured that going slow on an old windy road was better than sitting in stop-and-go traffic for 5 hours. Sarah was very against the decision. When I asked her why, she just told me that she had a bad feeling about it. Still, somehow I convinced her that we'd be fine. So, instead of turning right and heading down towards the highway, we turned left and headed deeper into the mountains. The road turned to dirt pretty quick. Sarah jumped into the back seat so she could stretch out, and she recorded some of what we saw out the window, which is what you've been seeing up till now. I was shocked at how deserted it was. We only passed one house over the entire hour, and not a single car. We'd been on the road for a little over an hour when we came around a hill. Up ahead, there was a single crashed car just off the road. I pulled off to the side of the road, and got out to take a closer look. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but realized I had no signal, not even roaming. I took a picture, which you can see here. I came around to the driver's side of the car, and saw that the driver's window was shattered, with no sign of the driver anywhere. Sarah walked to the front of the car and put her hand on the hood. "The engine's cold," she said. "That means it's been at least a couple hours since the crash, right? Are we the first ones on this road to drive by?" I told her that I didn't know, but that it could be with how few people we'd seen. Sarah pointed to the broken glass from the window. "It seems like a lot of this glass is inside the car," she said. "If the driver busted it to get out, wouldn't it make sense that it'd be out on the ground beside the car?" She was right. The inside of the car was littered with the safety glass from the window. I looked closer and saw flecks of blood covering some surfaces too. Where's the driver, though? I didn't like that. I told Sarah it was time to go, and that we'd call somebody once we had cell signal. She agreed, and we hopped back in my car. I turned the key in my ignition and heard the rapid clicking noise that meant that my battery was dead. I popped my hood and saw that there was a bunch of corrosion built up on my battery terminal. I swore under my breath. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. I told her that it meant that there wasn't a good connection between the battery and the motor, and that the battery was probably dead. We could fix the corrosion, but we need a jump to get the car started again. I talked the problem over with Sarah. We were already dozens of miles from her parents' place, and we had no signal. Based on the car wreck, it was likely we wouldn't see any more traffic for hours at best and days at worst. On top of all that, the sun was starting to get low in the sky. We needed to find someone with jumper cables. I remember that we'd passed a house a few miles back on the road. I figured it'd be best if Sarah stayed with our car on the side of the road, so I started walking back up the road by myself. It took me a little more than an hour of walking before I saw the house again. I'll show a picture of it here. The house had a strange architecture, with part of the top floor hanging over the lower floor. I saw there was a small garage in the woods behind the house. I walked up to the door and knocked, calling out as I did. There was no answer. I went to the window next to the door and looked through. I saw that the inside of the house was abandoned, but that there was a message scrawled on the wall. I could just barely make out the words. It said, "They can't see you if you don't make noise." I read it over and over. They can't see you if you don't make noise? What did they mean? I checked my phone again, but still had no signal. I yelled out for help, but heard nothing. Judging by the state of the place, I figured it must have been abandoned. On top of everything else, the sky was starting to get dark. I made my way towards the garage behind the house and kicked in a door. The inside was in fairly good condition still. There was an old cabinet against the wall. I opened it up and saw some rusted jumper cables and a flashlight sitting on a shelf. I figured that the battery in the crashed car we saw might still have enough charge to jump my car, so I grabbed both of them. At this point, it was completely dark outside. I started walking back towards my car and was happy to see that the flashlight still worked. I was alternating between walking fast and flat-out running. Something about the house and the message had given me a bad feeling, and I was eager to get back. I was walking along the road when I heard a scuffling sound out in the woods behind me. I stopped and looked back for a long moment. That's when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned my flashlight forwards and saw a creature standing behind a tree. It moved its head in erratic motion, constantly twitching. It looked like a gigantic spider with a human head. Its eyes reflected the light of my flashlight like headlights. I heard more motion in the woods behind it. I locked my muscles in place. I gripped my phone hard and accidentally pulled the volume button, which I have set to take a picture on my phone's camera. My phone took a picture, making the loud clicking camera noise. At the sound, the creature snapped its head in my direction and began moving around the tree. Here's the picture that I took. I pulled back my arm and threw my flashlight as hard as I could behind me on the road. The creature looked over my shoulder and with its spindle legs started walking towards the flashlight. I noted that it moved pretty slow. The moments it took to walk by me were an eternity. When I saw it was a dozen yards away, I started running down the road and didn't look back. After an eternity of running, I reached my car, completely out of breath and full of adrenaline. Sarah opened her door and got out. "Hey, you find any help?" she asked. I yelled for her to stay in the car and ran up to the crashed one. I reached my hand into the broken window and popped its hood, then ran around and pulled its battery out. I attached the cables I'd brought to both batteries, and Sarah turned over our car's engine. I ripped the cables off of our battery and slammed the hood shut, then jumped into the driver's seat and sped down the road. Once we made it home, I told Sarah about what happened. She started bawling and told me that she'd heard stories while growing up about the valley that we'd been in, and that it was the reason she was hesitant earlier. She never imagined that there was actually anything to them. I don't know what to think now. If I find anything else, I'll be sure to update you all here. If you've enjoyed the story, you can click here to hear another one, or subscribe below. I update new stories every Wednesday.